Greetings, everyone. Happy full moon, and also we have a summer solstice coming up. So celebration to that. Peace and blessings, all. I just wanted to share with you guys the book that I have been reading, Buried Beneath the Baobab Tree. This book was written by two authors. One of the authors' name is, and I apologize if I butcher this, Adaobi Tricia Nwaubani, and she's a Nigerian writer and journalist. Her debut novel, I Do Not Come to You by Chance, won the 2010 Commonwealth Writers Prize and was named by the Washington Post as one of the best books of the year. Her writing has been featured in the New York Times, The Guardian, and The New Yorker, and she writes a regular column for the BBC website's Letters from Africa section. Viviana Mazza is an Italian journalist who writes for the foreign section of Corriere della Sera. She has been on assignment in various countries such as Syria, Iran, Egypt, Pakistan, and Nigeria. In 2010, she won the Marco Lucetta Journalist Prize, dedicated to raising awareness of the plight of children affected by war. She has also written the story of Malala and the baby Nelson Mandela, which were published in Italy. So you have a Nigerian writer and an Italian writer coming together to write this. And this book is about the 276, 276 girls that were kidnapped by Boko Haram. And this was just the one group of girls that went missing. This is not, all of them overall. Boko Haram is an Islamist extremist group. Their goal is to bring Sharia law to all of Nigeria. So they would, kill everyone in the villages, Christians. Eventually they were killing Muslims alike, just, off the strength of you can't be sure who's lying, who's telling the truth about, being on your side. So they would kill the others and take the young men and train them up to be soldiers, and they would take the young women and train them up to be wives and also soldiers as well. Some of them were trained to be soldiers. In this book, it's first person. It's first person experience of a 12-year-old girl, I believe, or she might be a little bit older, and she really likes to go to school. She likes to study. It talks about her experience with having a menstrual cycle and going to school in Nigeria and not having, the proper the proper napkins. She didn't have any pads to go to school, so it was an embarrassing experience. So when she was on her period, she would, not go to school, and then sometimes a van would come and give them donations and so on and so forth. So it talks about her desires at her age, the things that she looks forward to, the things she wants to achieve, how much she loves school. Some of the chapters are long, some of them are pretty short. They each have like a title, like this one is called Urgent Prayer, and then you had one that was called, Dad's Radio, and the Dad's Radio chapter was just like a reoccurring chapter, and it would talk about, it would just announce the things that Dad was listening to in his radio. Her father was listening to on his radio the different news about Boko Haram, the things that were going on in America. And it was funny because while like a lot of news in Nigeria was talking about, war and everything of the such, it would go on to talk about American news, and they were worried about the movie Frozen coming out and just a bunch of frivolous things while, these girls are being kidnapped and these people are, trying to take over all of Nigeria. And this is a repetition of something that I previously read. I don't have it up here. I read, what was it called? Children of Blood and Bone. Yeah, it's Children of Blood and Bone, excuse me. And they had segments where they were also listening to the news on the radio, and it was pretty much the same thing about how like the news in the country that they were in was kind of honest about the war going on and stuff like that. And then you would turn around and listen to the news on America, and it was a lot of like pop culture things and stuff like that. So I don't, just something to think about, something to put into consideration. Our news is kind of different. But yeah, I enjoyed reading her first person account of, her experience. it was very eye-opening to see, a first-hand account, read about a first-hand account of a young girl's experience going to school in Nigeria, and how, the difference between how boys are raised versus how girls are raised. And it does put a lot into perspective of how these, young boys grow up, and the things that they hold near and dear to their heart versus, the things that the young girls hold near and dear to their heart. And I think it brought me to the conclusion that, because I experienced this in my own family. We have a lot of people in my family, but the boys do get treated differently. They're not given the same responsibilities or the same weight on their shoulders as the girls are. And then it seems like when the boys are put some weight on their shoulder, it's like, hurry up and get it off, kind of. Or everybody's like, oh, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't ask this person for this, you shouldn't, put that responsibility on that person for that. But when it comes to the women in the family, it's like, yeah, put it all on them. And I see that, in this book also. And I empathize with that, because it is hard to grow up in a family like that where the expectations are different. And then it is hard to feel comfortable to want the things you want because they go outside of those expectations, So yeah, I could definitely empathize with that. It was so crazy to read, her first person accounts on her interactions with her friends, and how some of her friends were remotely kind of getting like Stockholm syndrome. Like, a lot of her friends, became in love with the person that they were assigned to be a wife to. A lot of the women felt happy to be a tool in the war. They were teaching the young girls how to put on a vest with bombs on it and they were teaching them how to detonate it, and they were giving them the false promise that as soon as you press the button, you're going to be surrounded by money and you're going to be in paradise. And that seems to be the propaganda that's used. That was also the propaganda that was used for the young boys. They were promised virgins, and so these girls were kidnapped, and now they're the virgins that were promised to the boys that are soldiers. And while some of the women had pleasant experiences with who they were assigned to, this main character, for example, she did not have a good experience with who she was assigned to. Her husband was a very rough and tough character. He was abusive towards her. So it gives you both perspectives. It gives you a perspective of someone who was easily manipulated into being okay with these things, and it gives you the perspective of someone who was not and who fought through and through, which it brings me back to reflect on a lot of like historical relationships, that people shed light on and celebrate. And I think especially with Black people, because we are so lost in our history and our culture, we're grabbing at straws and strings. We have family reunions every 2 years, not because also because we want to catch up with our family, but also because we lost a lot of our family and we're trying to find them. So when I read how past relationships and religious relationships and how polygamy is set up and stuff like that, they never tell a whole story of the history of it. It's kind of like you have certain people who fall in love with the story or the context of it, and they just run with it, and they try to oppress other people into believing in it and following in it without realizing that not everybody was Muslim. Not every ancient culture was Islam. Not every ancient culture was Christian. Not every ancient culture was monogamous or polygamous or, or sexual, period. Not every culture was like that, and we have a lot of people who are extremists who feel like, things that they believe in are one size fits all. And I see that a lot today with different things, and it's really scary because if you don't know history, you are very liable to repeat it. And I was recently reading Metu Netter, and they were talking about how countries are split in two because of religious differences, but it was just people's opinions on the religion. It wasn't the religion itself, because if you think of Islam, just like the main character in the book was saying, when you think of Islam, you think of peace. And a lot of people that were, implementing the Sharia law through Boko Haram, they were not practicing Islamic practices. They were doing what they wanted to do. They took a piece of history that they fell in love with, that was romanticized enough for them to, follow through it, by any means necessary. And a lot of young girls were kidnapped. A lot of young girls were killed. In the book, a few girls died in childbirth. Some girls died just from being hungry. Some of the girls, they started to turn on each other. When there were girls that still wanted to fight against Boko Haram, there were also girls that still wanted to fight with Boko Haram. So it created a rift between the women. And towards the end of the book, it gets a little bit more hopeful. I won't tell you what happens. I really want you guys to read the book. It's a very good book. In the end and the back of the book, that one of the authors wrote a story about, well, the afterword is what it's called, and she just talks about the girls that were kidnapped and how they came about to write this story, and the different stories they collected, and how some of the girls would, when they were found, they had to be desensitized, because a lot of these girls suffer from Stockholm syndrome. A lot of girls were mentally manipulated into following Boko Haram. There was a lot of fear that once the girls went home, because they were taught how to detonate bombs and create bombs and such, there was a fear that they were going home to, be a tool for Boko Haram, rather than just being like a rescue girl going home. So a lot of people had to go to schools and stay at the schools until they were desensitized. Some girls went home and they killed their entire family, and then themselves. Some girls just killed themselves. It's just very disheartening to read this story in the first count of this story. It's very eye-opening, because someone had brought to my attention a while ago. It's like, people have a hard time empathizing with things that don't happen to them personally. Like, you can read something and be like, oh, that's sad, but you're not really empathizing with them because it's not happening to you, and it's not happening to someone you love and hold dearly. And with the books that I have been reading lately, they have been calling me to empathize harder than what I have been. To read a story and actually see myself or my children or my husband or my friends or family in those positions, and really wonder, like, if this situation were to spread and come over this way, how would I feel? And in all honesty, it has. Black women have been going missing in America by the hundreds at an alarming rate. And what's even more alarming is the lack of effort to find the women that are missing in America. And that lack of effort has also been, displayed in this book also, because a lot of people were taking Boko Haram as a joke. It talks about how, one of the principals or teachers or something at the school actually received a letter prior to Boko Haram coming to the school and kidnapping the girls. And, a lot of people, disregarded it, didn't believe it, thought just because it was happening in other parts of Nigeria that it would never come to them, happen to them. I see this narration a lot, especially during, like, when I read about the Holocaust. That's what it brought me back to, in the Holocaust or 9/11. It's always that lack of empathy. Like, it's not going to come my way because it's over there instead. But what you don't realize is the things that you allow will eventually come to you. You're really just waiting for your turn. I see all the things I've read, things that happen in America, and then I look, across the ocean, and I see, countries in Africa kind of repeating the same behaviors that natives in America have repeated already, and has led to their demise. And when you don't know history, when you look over the ocean and say, oh, that was dumb how they did that, we'll never do that here, you are liable. You are most likely to turn around and do the same thing. And it's really sad. But all that to say, this was a really good read. It wasn't like a Debbie Downer or anything. It was just really, like, eye-opening. I really enjoyed this read. I really appreciate the women who came together despite, their differences, and came together with a common goal to give these girls a voice. I appreciate this. I'm pretty sure that the girls appreciate this 20 times over. I do hope that, I hope happiness for everyone. I hope that the girls who are not found are at least okay. Um, hope that they do find more girls. I hope that, more people find a useful way with themselves to help find these girls and help find all the women that are going missing. Uh, like 2 days ago, there was like this whole thing in Virginia. I live in Virginia right now. There was this whole thing in Virginia about like three or four human trafficking locations in Virginia Beach were found and shut down. And it's just like, wow, it's that close. I only live 45 minutes from Virginia Beach, and I've gone to Virginia Beach a handful of times. And just to think that, one of them times it could have been me. One of them times it could have been one of my girlfriends who lives in Virginia Beach. You know what I mean? It's just so crazy. And instead of thinking like it's not me, it's not going to be me, it's all happening over there, think that it is me. That is me over there, and it is happening to me. And it is happening to my family because we are all one and we all come from the same manifestations. Not saying that there won't always be darkness, because there will always be darkness. It will be an equilibrium of darkness to light, but I think that the darkness can be dimmed a little bit more than what it has been. It's actually been ruling the world, and that needs to change. Definitely needs to change. And sometimes it just starts with just writing a book and just shedding light on an experience. You never know who you inspire. Sometimes it just starts with making vlogs to talk about the books that you've read, because you never know who you inspire. Sometimes it's always the little things. You have to think about us. We're just, drops in the ocean, but you put enough drops together, you got the ocean, you got a wave, you got a hurricane, you got things going on when you put enough drops together, It's not just a drop in the ocean. It becomes something bigger. And that's important. But yeah, I just wanted to share this read with you guys. This is what I have read. Share with me some books that you guys are reading. If there are any books that you would like for me to read. I know that when I did the other books that I read, I kind of broke them down with you guys and read them, between parts. I will be doing that again, but I kind of took some time off because there are, like, as you can see, I have like a stack of books here. There are a few books that would probably be easier if I just read the whole thing and then do like a whole video for them. But yeah, thank you.